Hey, Mike, how's it going? I am gonna do a video or a live stream on a technique that Nick asked about. Um, it's the stack tying. I'm gonna do it on a tube fly. So, for those that are curious, what I'm tying on right now is just a tube. I'm using, of course, my Nor-vise, and I'm using the HMH large rigid tubing. You can do this on a tube, or you can do it on a. Oop, I gotta cut that and redo it. On a hook, just the same. Ain't no big deal. I'm just gonna burn the edge. Get a nice little rib. And push that over my thread stopper that I've got back here. That'll hold it in place and work just fine. And for what we're tying, it's a little bit bigger streamer pattern. Hey Brian, get Brittany on. She's gonna want to know this one, especially up here on the lock saw for bowls. So I'm just gonna start here, get a base going. And I'm gonna leave some room back here. I don't want to cover it all up. I want to have space to slide junction tubing on and for hook placement. Okay, so we're going to do a tiger bar style tube fly. This is the whole technique on this is just stack tying. So I'm going to start off with some polar flash. This is 2033 Mirage. And I'm going to grab one chunk of it. And because we're going to be using yellow, orange, and olive, I'm going to throw on some, kind of called the Sunrise, or Sunset. It's 6944 of the holographic Flashaboo. Oh, covered up the number. So I'm going to take a chunk of this. And this is definitely a fly where you don't need to be shy about the amount of material that you use. This is just in the tail. I'm going to kind of give it a natural taper, pull on some ends here and there, just to kind of even everything, uneven it. Gonna do 2 loose wraps, kind of work the flash around the tube a little. Bring it forward. Fold that back to help lock it in, and as I do that, I'm just going to kind of pull it down so it kind of moves its way around the hook. Just like that. And that's longer than what I wanted. I'm going to make my marker right there. So I'll trim that, but I've still got some good tapering in here. But I'm just going to run my scissors along that, just to give it a more taper. Okay, now for the back piece of bucktail. First patch, I'm just going to tie it straight in. I don't need anything, I don't really want anything that's going to flare too much. So I'm just going to take a clump, cut that, pull the short stuff out, kind of gauge it. That's pretty long. So I'm going to take the ends, pull the long ones, and even them up with the tips. And what that does is that creates kind of like a hand stack. That's going to be perfect. I want the flash to be just a bit longer than the bucktail. Okay, I'm going to go 1, 2, loose wraps, pinch it around the tube, and secure it. That way you can see it kind of covers a lot more of the tube. I'll come in and trim that. and then do a clump on the bottom. Same thing. Pull out the short stuff, take the long, separate it, stack it on. And again, 2 loose wraps. Kind of pinch it with your thumb, it'll help move it around. You can do that on a hook or tube. I like this on a tube because if I want to make it a bigger fly, I can actually tie a secondary piece and put it behind it when I line it up. Okay, now for pike, I would start gluing this puppy right away, but I'm not. This one isn't going into my pike box. The pike ones I tie are going to be a bit bigger. So I'm actually going to put a thread base down there, and that's going to mark where I want the next stage to be. Now this is where I want to go into more of the base of the tail, get more of that flary hair, and you can do a pretty decent chunk. And I'm going to pull the under stuff out just to make sure the tips aren't overly crazy long. That should work pretty well. Now I'm going to measure this. I want it to be about the same as the tail. I'm going to do a couple loose wraps. And this, I'm actually going to push this around the whole tube. That's why I do a loose wrap. I can kind of pinch it, get it the hair where I want it to be, and there we go. Now let's secure it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's good. Trim this stuff. And if you want to use a thread that matches what you're doing, that's fine. I usually go with white and black. I'm not super picky. Plus, I've got a gargantuan spool of white behind me that needs to be used up. Okay, so that's secure. I'm going to bring my thread right to the front. And Nick, this is kind of the technique I was talking about. I'm going to push this stuff back. You can do this with bucktail, flashabou, angel hair. It's actually the same technique I use to tie these guys. Just using bucktail instead of angel hair. Same thing I do with Icelandic sheep. Just going to pinch all that back. And because it's bucktail, I'm actually going to pinch the hair. That'll kind of help it. See how it just kind of stays. Bring the thread up. In front, I'm not going to tie on top of it. I'm just going to tie in front of it. Because I want body. I want it to flare a bit. That'll allow the fly to have more movement. And builds a good profile. Now see, it'll stay like that. It sits there. When this gets wet, it'll slip down and have more movement and flare as you're stripping it through. And again, I'm just going to come forward to my next spot. And depending on how big the fly and how thick the fly you want will determine your gaps. I'm going about 1/4 to 1/2 inch on my gaps. I'm going to say it's probably about 1/4. And I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do another nice thick clump. I'd say I'm even going through some bucktail here pretty well. I'm just going to pull out the short stuff. Now this has a lot of really long fibers coming up, so I'm going to pull those and just kind of even them out with the rest. Get that short stuff out of there. And again, I'm going to come in, do a little measuring. There we go. Push it down and just 1, 2, 3 loose wraps. That way I can just kind of pinch it. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's good and secured. Just come in and trim that up. And then push it back. And this technique is just a great way to to build volume without a lot of material. Pinch the bucktail and build basically a cone in front of the bucktail so it sticks back. We're not tying on top of it, because if you tie on top of it like this, see how much down it pinches? Without that, you're allowing it to flare and give your fly volume. So we're going to bring up a little bit. And I think, let's see, how long is this fly already? It's getting there. That'll probably be good for that. We'll go one more, but we're going to do a little closer. So we're getting towards the edge of our tube. This one may not be as thick. So again, we're just doing that. We'll do that, and then we're going to do our next step after we get this guy in. Because we built our volume, we built the body of the fly. 1, 2, 3. We'll just kind of pinch the bucktail around it. One too many wraps. There we go. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, we'll just trim. Now, the only time I trim it with bucktail, if I'm using Icelandic sheep or angel hair, I actually don't trim it until the very end, because the whole fly is basically based on that. And again, we'll just push this back, get our thread in front, pinch the bucktail. And if you're a big time bass fisherman or pike fisherman or chasing really, really big trout, this is definitely a pattern for you. Okay. That's there. Now we're going to go to the next phase. Clean up our bucktail, get that off our table. Now we're going to take some flash. Now we're going to do this a little differently on the flash. We're going to take 4 different kinds. I'm going to do a chunk of Mirage Polar Chenille to give it a nice scale look. Like that. Put that down. We're going to use some of this orange gold mix, the 6944, to give it a nice red orange taper to it. And some gold. I'm also going to use, because I'm going to do an olive top, olive holographic. Do a bit of that. Not a ton, but enough to throw some olive in there, just to change the shade up. And just because we're going to do an orange bottom to this, I'm going to take some, actually I'm going to use the yellow instead of orange. This is the Grizzly Flashaboo. This is the fluorescent yellow. This is going to add some nice fluorescent strands to it. And again, I'm going to do a chunk of that. Don't be shy using material. You're not going to go through a ton of these, but they're fun to tie. So here's the trick. I've got 4 different kinds of Flashaboo sitting here. I'm just going to take in my hand and twist them just like that. That'll help mix it up. Then I'm going to take one of these guys and just run it through the flash. I'm going to be very gentle because the Polar Chenille's got a nice nylon fiber in it that gives it a little more support. I don't want to tear that up too bad. Okay, so I've got that blended together. I'm actually going to cut this in half. I'll show you why in a second. So that's the clump of flash we're going to throw on this thing. It's a lot. but there's a reason to it. Loop tool. Here we go. Now the one thing you want to do, if you got clamps, use them. You can put it around here. They'll get it out of the way. I'm just going to take some extra copper wire I got sitting here. I usually use lead when I do this. I'm just going to give it a few wraps. That way it's out of my way. I'm not going to get knotted up in it. Because we're actually going to create a dubbing loop. Close it off. Okay. Here's our clump. We're going to take this and we're actually going to uneven it. I don't want it tapered. Well, I want it tapered. I don't want it even, I should say. And that goes both ways. Okay. Now, we have this really tapered clump here. We're going to take this and throw it into our dubbing loop. Now, I don't want this to sag down. I want this to be even with me. Otherwise, it'll fall out. So I'm going to use my finger to hold this out and keep the weight tight. And we're going to spread this stuff around as much as possible without letting it drop. So get it nice and spread out through the loop. Now you've got this nice loop of flash. I'm going to pinch the thread. I'm not going to allow the flash to spin like that. It actually got grabbed by the hook. Let's undo that. Whoop. And we're just going to have a little less flash in it. That's okay. We'll even it out. We're just going to allow that to spin. And grab and go. Now that it's trapped, we can just let it spin. Give it a little pull, that'll help it spin more. Here we go. I'm going to take a little bit of dubbing brush. Just going to brush out that flash. Get the loops all undone and ready to go. Then, usually I'll wet my fingers with like a sponge. Pull this back, I forgot my sponge, and I'm not going to lick my fingers. As someone who works in the industry and deals with product on a daily basis, licking your fingers is the worst thing you can do. This stuff is we try to clean it as much as possible, and even then, the stuff we clean off, feathers and stuff, we ain't going to lick our fingers. So we're just going to wrap our dubbing loop around. There we go. Now it's still pretty flashy, but I actually wanted this one a little bit more flashy, and I'm just gonna finish that off, wrapping that over it, just like that. Close it off. And tie it off. There we go. Now you can create dubbing loops all you want, if you want that. I don't do a ton of them, so I try just to make them as I go. Throw that away. So it's got a pretty good flash wrap around it. I'm going to take that off now. There we go. And you can see that profile, that bucktail just poof, flares that flash out pretty well. So now we're right up front. What we're going to do next is grab some sheet. I'm going to flip this to the bottom. And I use my my pinholes here or my screw holes here, like this guy, to determine what's going to be top and what's going to be bottom. This is probably the best Icelandic sheep that I've ever tied with. It's from Sibai. The denseness of the sheep is absolutely ridiculous, and the length you get on the hair is nuts. But I don't need a lot for this, so I'm just gonna take a clump, cut it. I'm gonna pull this under fuzz out. I'm gonna put that like that. Just give it a good wrap. I want to keep it kind of on the bottom. But I want to make sure it flares out when I go to use it. I'm going to trim this up because it's a little annoying. I usually do that when I give it a taper trim. So I'm not cutting it straight, I'm actually cutting it at an angle. Okay, there's the bottom. That's going to be my throat. So when that folds over, I'm going to give this really nice orange belly. Now I'm going to do the top. The top I'm going to do a little different. This is the same stuff from Sibai. This is their Icelandic sheep, but what they did is they shaved it off the skin, so it's not like this, and it's blended with angel hair. This is a much cheaper way to buy it than this, so if you're not using a lot, go this route. Except your key colors, unless you use it a lot, then I really recommend dropping the money and getting that stuff. So with this, it's on a hank, which means it's got a zip tie in the middle. I'm just going to take it and pull out what I need, because when it's like this, you can actually fold it over, just like you would an angel hair or a flash. So you really don't need a lot, because you can take it and even out your strands. And because it's long on both ends, I'm not going to trim the olive. So that's secured. All right, now let's do our stack tie. Go front, pull it underneath. Make sure this is all pulled back, and we're just going to go wrap right in front of it. With a really small thread head. And then, where's my whip finisher? It's disappeared on me. No! Well, good thing I got fingers. Just 1, 2, 3. Make sure it's tight. Do another set. There we go. And we'll take this guy again, brush it out, get all those knots out of the hair and the flash. Now you can see how long this is. That hair is really long. I'm just going to take my scissors. I'm not cutting it, I'm scraping it. That way it'll actually taper itself when you do that. Voila, here we go. Now before I go any further, I'm going to take this, cut a little bit, and just heat up the tubing to even it out so I don't have any edges. And I leave enough room on there because if I slide a cone or something on it, the cone can slide back onto the fly if it wants to. And there we go. Now, we need to throw some eyes on this puppy before we go any further. And I love using the ghost eyes that we have. I'm going to do, that's the one, I want the bigger one. There we go. These are our ghost eyes. Yeah, I like these a lot. So I'm actually going to turn this sideways. I'll put the eye right there. I use Raid Zap mainly because it's non-toxic. It's an organic resin. Doesn't I have a reaction to other stuff. I can use Solarez, but if I use too much of it, my skin just gets kind of irritated. So I'm going to do a gob on the back. And I'm going to put a gob right where I want my fly to be. Because I want this to kind of go right into the hair. And I'm using a flex. Whoops. Oh, landed perfectly up. Ha. No, I didn't that time. So we'll put that right there. And I'll actually mash it down because that'll cave into it a little bit. Take our light. Kind of pull that back. Here we go. Now let's do the other side. Now, another reason I like using this stuff over epoxy and whatnot, and super glue, is if it drops like that onto my table, I can hit it with a light and it'll peel off my table. Put another gob right there. Drop that on the gob, pull it back, kind of move it in there. Here we go. Those are actually pretty even. And that fly is just going to be really bright with that orange in those eyes. Okay, and just to kind of finish it off, I'm going to pull this stuff back and put a nice little glob right in front. That'll soak in a little more behind the eyes and come out with a kind of like a nice little head cement. And now you've got a little more of a symmetry on the head. Now what kind you want to use is up to you. If you use too much thin stuff, it'll soak into all the hair and everything and get too nasty. I'm using a flex for this that allows the eyes and stuff to move a little bit with the hair. And it'll soak into it about perfect. Alright, there we go. That's the whole thing, guys. And then if you want to have some more fun with it, we're gonna just throw some bars on it. Now, one thing I also like to do when I do this is just kind of come in and throw some random spots. So you got barring, you've got your randomized sections, and you're good to go. All right, guys. So that's kind of showing the stack tying technique and kind of a really fun big bass, big trout, pike, smaller version of a pike fly. So, cool. Thanks for watching, guys.